Welcome to this episode of QuaRENtine Creations from the Renaissance Theater in Mansfield, Ohio. We are still here partnering with local artists who have donated their time and their talents to help us get through this. Now, obviously, we've switched up formats a little bit tonight, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But first, I want to take this opportunity to talk about Giving Tuesday as part of Richland Gives. So Giving Tuesday is a nationwide fundraising event for local nonprofits. Now, normally this takes place in the fall, but because of COVID-19, the program has been moved up to May 5th. It's May 5th. So please consider supporting the Renaissance or other local nonprofits. Now, for more information, you can visit richlandcountyfoundation.org, or we'll be posting information on our website and various social media platforms. Now, for tonight, we have changed formats so we can take an in-depth look at all the original pieces that have been created at the Renaissance. We've decided the best way to do that is to really talk to the people involved, specifically the creator of all these pieces and the artistic director of the Renaissance. So now joining us is Michael Thomas. Hi, Michael. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Ryan.
So for people who don't know, could you tell us a little bit about your history and what brought you to the Ren?
Sure, absolutely. I grew up in New London, Ohio, and went off to Wright State to college. And from there, I went on to Chicago, which is where I sort of stretched my legs a little bit. And I think that it's what I went off to Chicago thinking I wanted to be a very serious actor, because that's what I was in college at Wright State. And I got there, and as with everyone, you sort of morph and you just find new things that you love. And what I started doing was writing shows. And I wrote a show with my friend Jeff Richmond that turned out to be a big hit in Chicago that ran for like 8 or 9 years. And that sort of cemented what my future was going to be then, because I found that I still like to perform every now and then, but what I liked even more was creating something and sort of writing your own ticket. I say this to kids who are just starting off, but putting your career in your own hands is so much better than putting your career in someone else's hands. So that took me on to working on, with my friends on television and film and things like that. And then in, I guess it was 2005, my mom's was in bad health, and we bought a house. We bought an old farmhouse down in Butler, and mom lived there, and my sister lived there, and I was still working in New York at the time and going back and forth. And mom lived there for about a year and passed away. And my sister got remarried and moved away. And all of a sudden, here I was out in this farmhouse. And I was working remotely, and a lot of the stuff I did was on the computer. And so I said to my sister one day, I said, well, are there theaters in Mansfield? I could go and do a comedy improv class, because I had worked at Second City in Chicago, or I could do a musical theater class, anything, just for something to do, just to have a little social interaction. And she told me about the Renaissance, which I did not know existed. And I met with Terry Bergman, who was the CEO at the time, and she brought me on actually as a guest artist. Then we did a piece called Remember Me Always, High School Yearbook of 1977, which was a wonderful piece. That was our second piece. We did the Unforgettable Marvelines, about a sort of hapless girl group of the 1960s. We did Twilight Gardens, which was a comic yet very emotional piece about aging and people in a retirement or assisted living community, and the main actress, the main character, is suffering from Alzheimer's disease. And then we went into shows like Hot Mess and Last Act and At Last, the Etta James Show.
Well, great. Well, let's go ahead and bring on some guests, and we'll get talking about some of the more recent productions.
Perfect.
So let's jump into some specific production. So we'll begin with the most recent one, and one of the most acclaimed, your original biographic musical, At Last, An Evening with Etta James. So joining us now is technical director Aaron Nicholas and the star of At Last, Condrea Weber. And Connie, so what research did you do specifically to portray Etta?
Well, for one, I was raised listening to Etta James, but I did a lot of research by watching a lot of her live concerts and just how she interacted with the crowd because I knew this was going to be more of an intimate type feel that Michael was going for when he wrote this show. So I was just kind of watching her body movement and things like that. But I did a lot of internet research and reading as far as stuff like that. I didn't get her book until after I was done with the run of the show. So
Now, Aaron, I want to talk to you about the tech for this show. One of the reasons we wanted to talk to you is because it's very different than anything we've done in 166 before. So, would you talk us through the sound design and how important that was for this?
Yeah, when Michael talked to me about the show specifically, it all kind of takes place in the same bowling alley lounge. Um, so it was really important to me that we kind of made it feel and kind of captured that vibe. So actually, the video production guy for QuaRENtine Creations helped with like this really awesome neon sign set design logo. Ryan Shreve did this really great graphic for the bowling alley sign, the lounge sign. And then we put in bowling alley sound effects kind of under the whole show. So, and then the concept was that Etta would kind of pull you out of your reality and the sound would get really kind of expansive and large. And you know, very much that huge lounge jazz vibe, otherworldly kind of at times with some of the reverb and effects we were using. And then all of a sudden you'd be right back in the bowling alley again. So it was a lot of fun, especially because the band was phenomenal. Alter Ego, Connie's band is just absolutely incredible. So it was really easy to mix and make sound good because the talent was so strong.
So, Michael, when you were putting the show together, how did you decide? I mean, there's so many Etta James classics. How did you decide which songs to choose, and how did that evolve as you were doing the show?
I picked my favorites, and Condrea picked her favorites. And then we happily met in the middle. There were some up until the last minute, remember, that we cut just because the show was getting a little bit long. And some songs just, I mean, while they were all lovely, they weren't adding anything to the evening. They weren't adding anything to the story. And it came down to having to, I can't remember, Condrea, did we cut 2 or 3 of them?
I think it was three and
Yeah, we cut 3 of them out. You know, I always worried about Connie's voice because it was an hour and a half up there singing, you know, and sometimes we would do, you know, in rehearsals, we would go do a run through twice. And
right.
she was always just as great at the end as she was at the beginning. And I don't know how she did it because I got exhausted and I was just sitting in a chair. But it was that is how we chose the songs. And I think we also found once they started rehearsing them, which ones really soared.
Right.
You know, that you know, I've told this story to a lot of people, but it was maybe the 3rd or 4th rehearsal. I was sitting there, and Aaron was next to me, and Condrea and the band were going to town, and I turned to him and I said, "My gosh, this is really good." And I don't remember ever saying that in a show before that early in a rehearsal period. It just absolutely floored me because these songs would just transport you. I mean, you really felt like you were there with Etta James. It was an incredible thing to experience.
Are there any plans to revive it soon?
Well,
I think it's sort of a secret, but you will absolutely the community will see more of this and outlying communities as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Aaron,
Thank you.
so much for joining us, and stay safe out there.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, so now we're moving on to last act, and joining us are Maddie and Colton Penwell and Lori Turner. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Hi, thanks.
So this is a completely original story, Michael. So how did you choose this story?
I wanted to do something backstage because I and everybody I know who works in the theater has backstage story, has things that went wrong and things that, you know, disasters that happen on stage. And, you know, at the time they're mortifying, but afterwards you look back and you laugh and laugh and laugh at them. So I wanted to take all of those and throw them into one piece and make it a musical about a group of people who are not horrible, but are just in a desperate situation. And, as much as I love Waiting for Guffman, and I've said this to several people, you often get the feeling when you watch that movie that they're just making fun of people. They're making fun of people who don't have much talent. And while it is hilarious to do that, I didn't want to put on a show that just made fun of actors who weren't very good. I wanted to put on a show about actors who did have talent, but we're just channeling them in odd ways. And this was something that had happened to me in Chicago, that somebody had asked me to be a part of an original show that was absolutely the looniest thing I had ever heard of. And it was embarrassment so bad that I used to blur my eyes when I'd go out on stage because I was so embarrassed to be in it. And good actors find that sometimes on stage, that they find themselves in production that are probably not worthy of their talents.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of actors with talent, we have a lot. We have a couple with us today. So, Lori, you do a lot with the Renaissance, of course, and you've been performing for a long time. So, how does this show compare to things that you normally do?
What was really different for me with this show was the process, because we were creating it as the concept was there, but we were actually creating it as we went, which was both gratifying, terrifying, and stimulating all at the same time.
So, Maddie and Colton, could you expand on that, the collaborative process that the show presented to you?
So we started with a table read of what Michael had already kind of fleshed out a little bit, and he talked about some ideas for songs, and then asked our opinions about it. And I remembered the first read through, we just all kind of stared at each other like, what? Because we'd never been asked to do anything like that before. So that muscle was very much like, oh, I don't remember how to be creative.
Well, we were involved with Hot Mess, and that was even more fleshed out than Last Act was. So this was, we had closed rehearsals. It ended up being a very safe space because everybody could, it wasn't just like Michael giving us that script and saying, here, do this. It was pitch your ideas, do this, do that, try this. It might be the single most purely creative endeavor I've ever been a part of.
How much of your character did you have control of? And Lori, feel free to chime in as well. Little quirks and things that you got to add, was that all from Michael, or did you work together with him to create?
Oh no, that was a team effort. I mean, it really was a team effort. Like, we'd be doing something and someone who wasn't even playing the role, or someone other than Michael, would be like, hey, it'd be really hilarious if you could like have this tick and you just like cluck like a chicken. And it'd be like, okay, I'll try that.
So it was also, it marked a first for us at 166 in the fact that we were able to work with Actors Equity to bring in a union actress.
Absolutely, yeah. And I had, just as with Lori and Maddie and Colton and Ryan and the rest of the cast, part of that beginning part of rehearsal that Maddie was referring to was me just sort of seeing these actors in the space and on how I should write for them. So that was part of it too. And when I decided I was going to ask an old college friend of mine, Suzanne Bouchard, who has always been an amazing actress, and I knew she would take to this like duck to water, even though she would deny it, even though she is the first lady of theater in Seattle and plays, Shakespeare and Shaw and all these monumental roles. I knew that she had this in her because it's the kind of stuff that we laugh about. And so I asked her to come and join us, and she is, of course, Equity. And this was our first Equity contract. And of course, she came and did an amazing job and learned this stuff lightning fast and bonded so well with our actors here. And I think that, she learned from them and they learned from her. And it was really amazing.
The worst thing about the experience was I was completely outclassed by that company. They know how to sing and dance already. They know how to read music, and they have rhythm. They've been working already for several weeks. And I came into it just cold as a newbie. And working with Michael was, I don't know what to say. Goodbye.
Well, I hope that we get to see the last act again in some form or another. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Maddie, Colton, Lori, thank you. Stay safe.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, so let's finish up by discussing your first original musical at the Wren, one that was so successful you had to do it twice. So we're now joined by Ryan Shreve and Leah Gasoris to talk about Hot Mess. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
So, Michael, why don't you start off by take us through the concept of this particular piece?
Well, I wanted to do something because at that point, reality shows were such a big deal. And, you know, I couldn't even keep track of them, didn't watch any of them, so I wasn't really aware of them. But I also wanted to have some sort of really theme to it. So I picked as something as ludicrous as this sounds, the story of Medea, basically a woman who is treated cruelly by her husband and takes revenge. And so that is the plot of Hot Mess, a woman who was scorned and starts taking revenge on people. We just did it in the context of reality shows. So all of these shows, you know, like the Honey Boo Boos and the Kardashians and the Hollywood Housewives and the, oh my gosh, Leah would probably remember better than I do. You know, the Amish and the Duck Dynasty folks all come together to tell this story. And again, like I said, I wasn't familiar with these shows because I didn't watch any of them. And so I had to go back and do research on them to tell the story. But really the commentary that I wanted to tell was, I remember in the lyric of one of the final songs, they say something like, the freak shows in town, aren't you glad that you came? It makes your own life seem a little more sane. It was sort of the theme that we went with, was that people just spend their lives watching these shows, perhaps to make themselves feel a little more normal. And the idea of voyeurism and watching other people's lives and I wanted to touch on all the subjects, which are all serious subjects, told in, as we did with Last Act, in a very ridiculous way.
So Ryan and Leah as well, what was the process like as actors jumping into something as crazy as this?
Hot Mess was one of my favorite processes I've ever probably gone through. It's very similar to the Last Act, but we, from the get-go, Michael gave us pretty much an outline of how he thought the story should go, but he would task us with kind of filling in our own jokes and filling in things with, you know, the TV shows that he's not so familiar with. And we came upon the Kardashians and Duck Dynasty and all this fun stuff that was, you know, popular at the time. It's still popular today. It's crazy. But it was just a lot of fun, and being tasked with writing your own jokes is daunting, but also a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun around the table.
Leah?
Yeah, I second Ryan. I am definitely a character actor through and through. So this was so much fun for me. I love, especially working under Michael, you can just like throw something out there, and if the spaghetti sticks, great. If it doesn't, but like it made a really cool design, we'll go with it. And that's kind of how this process went. It was just so much fun to be able to play and to try new things, play a multitude of characters, which every single actor, I think there were like only 6 of us, maybe 6 or 7, and we all played at least like 3 or 4 different roles. So it was definitely lots of fun, keeping on your toes. Honorable mention for Margaret and that squirrel mask. That was a highlight of my illustrious career for sure. Yeah, it was great.
I was going to ask you about how the reception was to this, but you said it sold out. I mean, almost immediately, and then you did it again, correct?
It was astounding. I mean, it was really astounding. I don't think people in Mansfield had ever seen anything quite like it. And again, it did have a feeling of improvisation to it, as Last Act did, not nearly as much as Last Act had, but there were moments of when Ryan was saying writing jokes, I think he was talking about adding bits. Isn't that what you meant, Ryan?
Yeah, not like writing things.
I don't remember a lot of script changes, but what I remember is these guys ran with the ball, like with the bits that they did, that they came up with. And Leah's, of course, with the squirrel mask, which still makes me fall on the floor laughing. And Ryan had a certain appendage that he seemed to get bigger and bigger with every show that ran down his leg. So it was things like that truly made it such a unique show. And their fun in doing this stuff, it just really, really played to the audience. The audience just ate it up. I mean, we had people coming back. You couldn't get tickets to it, but they were, coming in and watching it and try to getting seats for it. So it was really amazing.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us, Leah, Ryan. Thank you for talking with us, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. So a big thank you to all the guests who have joined on tonight's call. But Michael, before we go, can you talk a little bit about what is next for the original works at the Renaissance?
Absolutely. We're starting this fall in the fall of 2020. We have an exciting new program called Emerging Artists. And basically what this is a continuation of what we've been doing at the Renaissance, which is trying to grow new works. The only difference is that we want to bring in other people. Take some of this off of my plate, and we want to really get behind young artists and writers, not even young, they can be any age at all, who want to try their hand at this. And so we're starting with 3 amazing productions as part of this Emerging Artist program. And that basically is just giving them the chance with some stewardship of seeing their work put up on its feet, workshopping the piece, and doing performances of it. And so we have 3 wonderful pieces. One of them written by our own Aaron Nicholas, and one of them is in collaboration with Olo Ohio, which is a nonprofit group that helps detainees of the raids that happened at Corsos and all of the immigration raids with the undocumented people that happened all over the state of Ohio. And so that's an exciting. And we have one more original piece as well on top of that. So 2021 is going to be an amazing year in Theater 166 because we're going to see 3 absolutely new debut performances.
That is incredible. Thank you, Michael, so much for joining us tonight. And thank you for watching. If you enjoyed tonight's episode and want to donate or just learn more about the Ren, please visit our website at rentickets.org. And we'll leave you tonight with a reunion of the cast and crew of all the Ren originals that we talked about. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.
Stephanie Hayslip, and I was in The Last Act.
My name is Adina King, and I was in Sentimental Journey.
I'm Leah Gasoris, and I was in Hot Mess.
Addie Penwell.
And I'm Colton Penwell.
And we worked on Sentimental Journey,
Hot Mess,
and The Last Act.
I'm Aaron Nicholas, and I was the technical director for The Last Act and At Last, An Evening with Etta James.
I'm Abe Swinger. I worked on Hot Mess, Last Act, and At Last.
My name is Condria Weber, and I have worked on The Unforgettable Marveline, Hot Mess, and At Last, An Evening with Etta James.
Hi, I'm Ed Jarlett, saxophonist for the At Last show.
Hey, this is Harmony Sauter, and I was in Hot Mess.
Hey, I'm Ken Harvey. I was in The Last Act.
Lori Turner, and I was in The Last Act.
I'm Mike Miller, and I was in Sentimental Journey.
I'm Ryan Shreve, and I was in Sentimental Journey, Hot Mess, and The Last Act.
Thank you, Michael. That's horrible, but great. I love it.